Okay, we are taking a look at every team's 2024 as a whole before we tick over into 2025. So today it is the Bombers, but before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know how you think the Bombers fared in 2024. Otherwise, let's crack in. This season review is brought to you by Skills Beast, the best teaching apparatus to learn how to kick effectively with the correct technique every time. No matter what your age or skill level, Skills Beast will transform your kick. Head to skillsbeast.com to instantly kick better. And to break this all down for me, AFL commentator and analyst Darren Parkin. Darren, these numbers are pretty much the exact same.
Yeah, a bit spooky one for Essendon. The season's statistically almost exactly the same. Same ladder position, almost the same win-loss record. Basically the same points for, same points against. Fourth worst percentage in both years. And the pattern of the seasons were the same as well. I mean, so last year they were 11-12. This year 11-11-1 with that draw on Anzac Day. Points for, only 54 different. Points against, 26 different. Percentage was fourth worst last year behind Hawthorn, North and West Coast, and fourth worst this year behind Richmond, North and West Coast. Fourth worst for points against in both seasons. 2023 they were 8-5 after 13 matches. They then went 3-7 to miss the 8. This year they were 8-2-1, sitting in the top 4. Then went 3-9 to miss the 8. Last year they had some horrible blowouts in the back end of the year, lost by 126 to the Giants. They got belted by Geelong and Collingwood. And this year they got beaten by, not to the same extent, but losses by 45, 53, 40 and 39 over the last 10 weeks. So, yeah, same pattern, set a good platform, and then unfortunately for them fell away.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, spooky numbers. All right, so heading into 2024, taking a look, so they were top 8. They looked a top 8 side for most of 2023. So coming into 2024, as ridiculous as Bombers fans usually are, they were expecting to play finals this year.
Yeah, I think last year in particular, when they had that patch towards the middle of the year, where they beat Adelaide quite convincingly in a highly entertaining game at Marvel, round 15 or 16-ish, they looked really sharp. And if you looked at their fixture, they looked a good chance to finish 5th or 6th last year. And the way that all fell over, you thought, maybe a young group that didn't quite have the depth, that it sort of slipped a touch. They went and got some quality players in the off-season in Ben Mackay to bolster their defence, Goldstein strengthen their ruck, Gresham, Dersma from Port Adelaide as well. That it looked like they'd probably done enough to address some of that. So the expectation, I think, would have been that they weren't too far away from playing finals. But if you look closer at their list, we mentioned them being young. They're actually not as young as it may appear. They're the 6th most experienced team in the competition on average games and average age. So they would probably feel they should be a little bit ahead of where they are at the moment. But, the way the season started for them, finals looked very realistic.
Okay, so looking at the lowlights for the Dons this year, so let's start with the percentage because that always tells the story.
It does. That's the balance effectively between your attack and defence. It's the easiest way to describe percentage. So how much do you win by versus how much do you lose by when it goes against you? And the Bombers' percentage was under 100 even when they were at 8-2-1 at that stage of the season, which is unusual. And then obviously when it went wrong, that's when they start to cop a couple of beltings. And the reason for that is it's very difficult for them to stop opposition run-ons. So they were ranked 15th for scores against. But if you actually break that down a little deeper, and that's a great part about what Champion Data throw up these days, they were ranked 15th for key forwards scoring against them, so key forwards got hold of them. And they were ranked 16th for small forwards scoring against them, so the smalls got hold of them as well. 15th for scores per inside 50 against, so they weren't stopping sides from scoring when they went inside. And most alarmingly, probably 15th for giving up coast-to-coast scores. So that's when the team wins the ball back in Essendon's forward line and then scores against them at the other end. So bottom 4 in all of those stats, which is a bit of an issue. There is a contrast to that doesn't look too bad, but that's the biggest thing they've got to address. Parrish and Ridley are pretty important players for them. They only played 21 of 46 games between them. And Peter Wright, who looked so good a couple of years back, just continues to slide, unfortunately, as a player. And they would have wanted a bit more out of the likes of Perkins and Cox and some of those recent draftees.
Yeah. All right, so we've been pretty brutal so far. Let's take a look at some highlights now. Okay, so looking at what went right for the Dons this year. So I think the big one, Goldstein.
Yeah, he did a pretty good job of their recruits that came in. They all started the year quite well, but I think Goldstein in supporting Draper was pretty solid. I mean, Nick Martin, in terms of their list, elevated his game to elite levels. His performances in some of their losses too really stood out. In the back end of the year, he was fantastic. I thought Nate Caddy showed a bit in the last couple of months, which makes it look like he'll be all right as a forward option for them. Even in that game, they lost to the Crows late in the season, and that Gold Coast game, those two really painful defeats they had. He showed a bit in those. And the contrast to the stat we were talking about earlier, where they give up scores when it goes into their defence, they're one of the better sides in the comp at locking the ball in their own forward half. So they're ranked between 6th and 8th in time in forward half pressure acts, forward half turnovers. So very good at locking it into their forward half. The only issue is when it gets out of their forward half, the opposition scores. So they've got to just lock down on that aspect of it and be a little bit better when the opposition's transitioning. And they should therefore be more competitive. So that's the positive contrast.
All right, this next segment brought to you by Skills Beast, who have been helping AFL players of all skill levels transform their kicks. So, who transformed their game for the Bombers in 2024? We have named Sam Durham.
Yeah, spent a bit more time in the middle. He's obviously been a pretty good wingman over the journey, but added a bit of depth to their on-ball brigade. Zach Merritt had an elite season and they needed some guys to come in underneath him. So he averaged 22 touches a game over the year, kicked 10 goals for the season as well, nearly 100 tackles, nearly 200 contested possessions. And from the moment they put him in the middle, he had 20 or more touches in 16 out of 19 games. So he set a really good platform for their midfield group.
All right, if there's one thing we know at ZeroHanger.com, it is headlines. And for the Dons this year, they stayed out of the headlines pretty well, except for maybe just the Jake Stringer standoff towards the end of the year.
Yeah, interesting. First time he'd played every game in a season for the Bombers. Most goals he'd kicked in a year for them, and the second most goals he'd kicked in any season with 42. Particularly pivotal early in the year. He was a match winner a couple of times, the Saints game at the start of the year and one or two others. But obviously, I think perhaps his consistency and a few other things around work rate were a bit concerning for the Bombers. And there was that standoff about whether they should have given him a certain length of contract, whether they'd be prepared to entertain options. And he wasn't traded until the last probably 20 minutes, I think. So it eventually got done and he's a giant now. But yeah, you'd think there's a degree of short-term pain in losing him. But some people have held the view that they handled it really well, others not so much. But time will tell. Yeah,
he's a pretty controversial figure, old Jakey. So I think in the long run, they'll be better off without him. All right, so the ins and the outs for the Bombers. So we, as we said, we mentioned Jake Stringer for the outs, traded to the Giants. Dyson Heppel retiring as Jake Kelly, and we didn't mention it in the headline section, but also Dyson Heppel not getting that send-off game was probably it rubbed a lot of Essendon fans the wrong way.
Yeah, and I think even some of his teammates, there's certain cultural things you want to teach. One being you're playing for finals and playing for the best result for the club all the time. But there is also that balance between respecting a club captain and a great of your recent times. So it's always a hard one for clubs to manage. But I think, most concerning would have been, I think a lot of his teammates were a bit disappointed at the way that was handled, which is almost worse.
Yep, absolutely. So also losing Kane Baldwin, Jaden Davey, Nick Hind, Jaden Hunter, Tex Wanganeen, and Sam Wiedemann delisted. Also quite a, never got a good run at it, but also probably didn't play to his potential. Yeah,
similar to even Josh Shackey, where they have a lot of those opportunities. They're highly regarded, been at more than one club, and it just didn't quite happen for them. Baldwin was a really hard luck story as a draftee. He had, I think, a couple of season-ending injuries as an underage player, and was still, a bit of a talent, but just didn't quite make it after that. Nick Hind was a sub a lot this year. That's a marginally surprising delisting, but he's been in the system for a little while now. But not a lot else would jump out as being particularly surprising.
Yep, absolutely. So in the players gained column, in terms of the draft, it was all about Isaac Kako heading into the draft.
Yeah, very exciting player, can score, will be able to play straight away for them, addresses a bit of a need. So if you look at what they're good at, which is forward pressure and creating turnovers. He's the type of player that could add to that and capitalise on it. So he headlined their draft crop, and then you look at had to wait a while for their second pick with Guerin as well, Angus Clark, Reece Unwin, Zach Johnson drafted, and then a couple of rookies. Archer Day-Wicks was a bit stiff not to go in the national draft, so good that he gets an opportunity. Jaden Ewan as well comes in, but Isaac Kako, the main talking point for them.
All right, so heading into 2025, this is an interesting one because as we've got here, Essendon have never said it's about the now. So what do you think their pass mark should be in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, Brad Scott's always spoken about the long game through it, but if your fans haven't seen you win a final for 2 decades, obviously they start to get a bit impatient. And look, I don't see that necessarily being, the long-term future. I understand that, but as we said, they're not as young as some of the other sides in the competition. They're similar to the last review we did around the Saints, that the Bombers in their last 6 completed seasons, so not counting the 2020 COVID year, they've gone 12, 12, 11, 7, 11 and 11 wins. So that's smack bang in the middle of the table basically for 5 of those 6 years. The one down year, the 7-win seasons when they sacked Ben Rutten. So the Saints would probably be similar, 11, 12, 10, 13, 10, that type of thing. So it's a really difficult part of the ladder to get out of, where you're not bad enough to bottom out and get early picks. You're not good enough to push up and contend. So how do you get out of that rung? And that's the challenge to where they are now. But looking at it from a practical sense, they just have to get better at defending the opposition when they have the ball. And if they can do that, they're not far away from playing finals. It's a very even comp, so not a lot has to change.
Yeah, I think most fans are probably they're just going to be expecting to win a final. I think they're not quite going to be satisfied with just squeezing into finals. They want to win one. So, and I think that's what their pass mark should be as well too. Well, that wraps it up for the season review for 2024 for Essendon. Darren, thank you. What do you reckon?
Yeah, they're always a curious watch. I think until that drought is broken, rightly or wrongly for Bombers fans, it's going to be a talking point.
Yeah, absolutely. So let us know in the comments if you think that Essendon are even capable of making finals and winning a final next year. Remember to subscribe, remember to like, and catch all your latest AFL news at zerohanger.com. This season review was brought to you by Skills Beast. Instantly kick better. Head to skillsbeast.com for more info.